as much as one may understand that politics is a business at the end of the day. Unfortunately, as much as you want to erase corruption from the continent, and specifically my country, Central African Republic, it's intrinsically, unfortunately, connected because people are not paid regularly. There's a lack of so many things. It leads people to eventually fall for the easy route. Understandably so. I'm not condoning it, but you got to understand, people got to make a living somehow, some way. You add on top of this the education issue, where a big portion of people of my generation did not necessarily get the right education, right access to proper schooling, because we had several years of, what we would call, in French, année blanche, which meant that teachers and schools would just close because they were not paid, and so they were going on a actual demonstration, a strike for a whole year, sometimes 2 3 years at a time. And so you can only imagine the damage that does to an entire population or segment of the population, because those who were able to benefit from private schooling, like myself, I was homeschooled. I received my courses from friends that would come from the CNED, Centre National d'Enseignement à Distance, which is it's like a school, but they're specialized in children who are schooled at home and abroad and around the world, and parents who want to maintain a curriculum that goes along with what is being taught in proper schools in France. So being that we followed the French system, I was able to get a normal sort of like course of education through this way of schooling, and it was costing quite a lot of money. For that, I'll always be grateful for providing this education and giving me the chance to be schooled from home and be very privileged in that sense. Sorry. But this was not the case for most people. So you're talking education, number one issue. Access to healthcare, forget about it. Access to means of making a living, forget about it. It's all about hustling, see what you can get. And this mentality of lack, there's no empowerment of the people and the population, unfortunately. And so you add that through the years. And of course, not everything is dark. There's been a few things here and there, a few pauses here and there where there was no conflicts. But the country, since the late 90s, has endured nothing but coups after this, after rebellion. It's just been nonstop. And so if you, on top of that, you add the fact that inequalities are rampant, not only economically, forget about it. There's no in between. It's either you're super poor or you're super rich. There's no in between. We don't have middle class. We don't have none of that. This leaves very, very little room for hope, right? It leaves very little room for nourishing even the sense of loyalty, the sense of commitment to a greater purpose, because you walk on an empty stomach for most of the day. And therefore, what can be expected of you? With that being said, those are realities you learn to work with. Unfortunately, for a lot of these powers, the populations, even besides this rampant lack of access to education and so on, people are not stupid. People can clearly, at a certain point, even though they may lack the most basic things, as far as perceiving sometimes the most refined intellectual aspect of things, there are just very basic approach to life that if you look at one situation, you're able to decrypt should you be taking your time. And since all you have on your hands is time and literally trying to survive, you're going to start observing certain ways the system works and understanding that, okay, hold on. We've been having, and for those of you who may not know, we've been having French army forces in the country for as long as they've been in the country, since colonization and even after the independence. And for the most part, the collaboration with France was pretty, cordial, and you could even call it, at the time of Bokassa, and the late Bokassa, Emperor Bokassa, and the late Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. The cohabitation between those two, even though at some point it became very, very messy, as one slipped with the buff of the other, etc. It was some weird shit. But at a certain point, yes, there was a certain sense of submissiveness from a lot of our leaders towards France, and Central African Republic was kind of like the playground of France for a long time, which ensured somehow a sense of stability. And then, once Ange Félix Patassé took over the power, which was, I think, probably one of our only democratic elections that really ever happened after, Patassé took it from Kolimba. After that, things went south. I think eventually Ange Félix Patassé started to, get close to, because he had some beef with the French at a certain point, so started to get a little closer to Libya with Gaddafi, and then Gaddafi sent over some troops to the country to help protect the power of Ange Félix Patassé. I mean, all of that brought a lot of friction. France obviously is not going to let another power, whether it be regional or continental or international, may it be, come into their protectorate. And therefore, definitely that didn't play out positively for Ange Félix Patassé at the time. Then, François Bozizé took over with a coup, and then stayed in power until 2013. I think that was, so for about 10 years, that's because this whole situation happened in 2002, 2003, if I'm not wrong. Well, I mean, I might be getting the dates wrong, but anyways, it's around the time that Bozizé took over with a coup. And then, for about 10 years, he was in power. And in 2013, he got, overthrown by Michel Djotodia. So all this time we've had Christians, leaders, Catholics or whatnot. And then Michel Djotodia, being Muslim, was the first Muslim president, who also happened to have taken the power through a coup. But it was rather bloody because he brought in Sudanese fighters, etc., to help him take over the power. And at the time, François Bozizé had some sort of relationship with Jacob Zuma. So he asked, Jacob Zuma, actually Jacob Zuma owning, I believe, some mines or some land in Central African Republic. There was some mixed management of resources as well, of South African resources, that also didn't help Zuma through the whole crisis he went through when he was accused of all this corruption and so on and so forth. And so he sent over South African special forces, who were, a lot of them were killed, trying to control the entry of those mercenaries and rebels, should we say, in the capital city, right? The reason why this rebellion happened is because at a certain point, François Bozizé or some of his people went inside the country, and Central African Republic has a lot of diamonds. We have obviously a lot of natural resources, etc., mines. And what happened is that some of these people went inside the country and they started switching things around, taking diamond dealers' properties, such as all the diamonds they may have bought that was there in the safes, etc. They just went and took things over. Or there's a few messy things that was going on, and they started increasing. I'm not too familiar with the details, so I don't want to be too far out there with my explanations, but because I would need some refreshment on that story. But basically, there was some unfair business going on over there that led a lot of these diamond dealers to create a coalition. And first of all, they said, well, they were asked to pay super, super, super high fees on diamond exploitation, and the tax that they were imposing on them was just insane. And basically, that was because Bozize was trying to get into the diamonds business from a state perspective. So he wanted to, start, getting involved in their businesses and imposing rules and ways of handling the business, which obviously was not going to pass, right? I mean, if you've been working a certain way for a certain amount of time, you're not going to like anybody coming into your turf and trying to tell you how to do your stuff. And on top of that, since you're already paying, taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then now they're stealing from you, literally. So all these people kind of like came together as a coalition called Seleka. Seleka, which got labeled very quickly by, well, I would say first, Bozize and his team made it about a bunch of Muslim people who are trying to take over the government. So I was there actually in the country in 2012, December 2012. I had just come back from a tour where I went to Angola, and I flew back to Central African Republic because I had at the time I had planned to live to move back to the country and establish myself and expand the label and just do a couple of cultural stuff, culturally related matters and endeavors. So when this whole thing started in the capital city, what happened is that, like most dictatorship, Bozice's older sons were known for doing quite a lot of horrible things. They committed atrocities on women, men, you name it. They started summarily killing people, executing them. They would go to the Muslim area of Bangui, the capital city, and they would just snatch people, and they would just never come back. So a couple of big business influences and Central African Muslim businessmen in the diamonds industry and so on were, quite a few influential of them were assassinated, right? Of course, nobody really spoke about that, but very quickly it was made known that, if you actually, to the point where I remember very well, I was in the car with the driver and he was actually making an announcement on the radio saying that if, the population of the capital city should be prepared because the people with the long robes, clearly you're depicting the Muslims, were coming and, he was asking the population to take arms, whatever it could be, to help defend their country. And clearly when people don't have much, obviously you gather a bunch of people with nothing, you give them a little something, well, you're gonna inspire quite a few people to do some fucked up shit. And so a lot of people resorted to starting to kill the neighbors, etc. So it became this whole mess. When you see that happening, then this increases now the anger of people, and by all means, because we have to understand, Central African Republic is, in its essence, Central Africans in general are very open and tolerant people. Like, there's never really been an issue between Muslims and Christians, and this is an absolute nonsense. In my own family, like, there is marriage between Muslims and Christians. So, where did that came from? We didn't understand it. Clearly, it was a machine. We call it in French machination. It's a manipulation, and it's easy to manipulate people that you've starved. And it's a Stockholm syndrome. You traumatize your people, and then you make them feel valuable, and you give them a little something that when you need them, that's when you start doing what you do to seduce them back into and get them back into your corner. And obviously there's gonna be, if people are hungry, people are gonna sell, man. They're gonna do whatever it means to get bread. A lot of people, not saying everybody, but a lot of people got involved into this shit. And so it became a thing where it was Seleka, the Muslims against the anti-Balaka. Anti-Balaka, Balaka in Sango means the machete. So anti-machete, right? So, and supposedly they were the Christians. But the thing is that anti-Balaka technically were some military guys mixed with some of the population transforming themselves into a militia. And because of course, at first the Muslims were not doing anything to the Christians. There was no retaliations because because of their belief, they were like, look, we are brothers and sisters. We are not here to do any harm. Like this is a machine. It's a manipulation. These guys are tired of what was this doing. So don't mix us up with this attempt to take the actual president down, because even though we may not agree with a lot of things that he's doing, that doesn't mean that we're necessarily behind this situation that is about to take place in the capital city. And so quickly, at a certain point, people are like, look, at a point you tired. So obviously retaliations, an eye for an eye, and then boom, 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 boom. People start killing each other, slaughtering each other. Eventually, Muslims are a minority in my country, right? Even at the time. And it was very quick to antagonize the population against them because they literally run the economy. But that's because they're hard worker. They're at it. They're busy. Bozize and his team knew all that, and what they did is just pointing the finger. It's like pointing the finger at the Jews for running Hollywood, etc., etc. Well, I mean, it is what it is. They've created this shit. Why do you not want them to run it? You know what I mean? And yeah, it became a thing where it's like, Muslims are not Central Africans, da 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 da. So all sorts of bullshit, absolute nonsense, obviously. From that, eventually, Jotoja, who was leading the Seleka coalition or rebellion, eventually overthrew Bozize, who took power through a coup. He left through a coup, whatever. I mean, nobody cried over his ass. I mean, I'm not personally a fan of the guy for more personal reasons, because before full disclaimer, Francois Bozize has tremendously damaged my grandfather, who was a reputable politician and a man of great values, and also my father. So there's definitely not somebody I like, but I can be I would say I'm actually capable of distinguishing whatever ill feeling I may have towards the man for that, and other aspects and be completely cold about my observation, and point out any good things he may have done, any of the bad things that he has done as well, because he's not completely bad. Obviously, the guy stayed in power for a bit, I think for about 10 years or so, and he did some good things in the country. You cannot deny that, and as a matter of fact, even though he's done my father and my grandfather wrong at a certain point of his presidency, one of the strengths of my dad and my grandfather was that they were really all about the peace. And I remember I accompanied them, even though at the time Bozize was not trying to meet them at all, because he was not going to confront those guys. He knew he fucked up their lives in some ways. And so, my pops and my grandfather went, saw him, shook hands with him, and these are levels that are beyond my capacity of understanding. But I see what it means. I see what it is to be in politics, and I understand the necessity to just sometimes just like, what, the past is past, let's move on. And so, hats off to my late grandfather and my late father for such a mentality, which we commanded absolute respect. So now that I've established this disclaimer, so my father was asked to join his government because my father, being a very reputable businessman in the diamonds industry, my father was a rough diamond dealer, very respected industry, very respected in the industry locally and internationally, reputable, a man of his word. I mean, impeccable reputation. He asked my dad if he would be interested to join the government, and be present as a minister advisor. And if we actually wanted to be the minister of the mines and petrol of my country, my dad was like, no, no, no. I'd rather be an advisor in the field, of course. But yeah, that's that, because I still want to continue running my business. So, if I have to become a minister, then I'm blocked, and I don't want to do that. So, okay, cool. And so that's just to fully be transparent with you guys. I'll share this story because when you start touching subjects like that, eventually people may try to come back at you, may try to use certain things. So it's important to be completely transparent, because I'm not doing this to point fingers. If anything, I'm trying to understand and make you understand my perception on this whole situation from facts, things that I've experienced personally, but also things that I've read through the news, but also compared information-wise with what some of my people locally would tell me and share with me, and it correlates, because obviously all that is to come down to what is going on now with the involvement of Russia in my country. So that's why I'm giving you guys a bit of a perspective on the conflict that led to this supposedly religious conflict, and we could even say that it was a methodical elimination of any Muslims in the country by the so-called Christians, which again were a bunch of thugs. So when my father, and that didn't happen until my father passed away, as a matter of fact. So my father accepted, was minister advisor to the president for mines and petrol, very quickly, my father got sick. As I've told you before, my father was poisoned. So that's what it is. So we're looking at, he accepted to have the president around February. I mean, the new guy, Jotoja, around February, March, November, boom, poisoning. December is sent to you. I mean, we fly him back to Europe, to France exactly, and he dies. My father dies on January the 27th. All right, cool. And around that time, things start, going completely mad, and eventually people start resenting the guy, because obviously one of the big mistakes he's done is that, and that was something that my father was completely against, and he was like, we cannot repeat the same formats. We've got to have a plural government. We've got to have an inclusive approach, and try to bring as many people as we can into this whole picture, because you cannot play the game of separatism and all these things. You have to be inclusive, and all these things were not necessarily taken into consideration, and leading for fast forwarding this whole episode. Jutoja gets bumped out of the sit after some extra massacres, which will continue throughout the whole year 2014, 2015. Actually, to tell you, Rwandan forces, that because at the time UN came, UN peacekeeping forces were in the country, and they say that what they had seen was even worse than what they had experienced in Rwanda during the terrible. How am I missing the word right now? How do you call this? I'm missing the word. Genocide. That's the word. Yes. So basically, there's a full-on genocide in the country, uh, done to the Muslim population of the country, right? And those are Central Africans. So you had, thousands and thousands of people fleeing away. It was an absolute shit show, a disgrace. Um, people, some people were eating Muslim flesh. Women were butchered. I mean, I can't. This is a phase of my country. This is a phase, that whole 2014, 2015, and so was an absolute disgrace. I mean, nothing can describe the level of horrors that um, this country went through. People that were family, people that were, literally sharing the same home, starting to, just kill each other, because or assassinate, family members because they were Muslims. It was that bad. Militias on both sides started to defend themselves, kill each other. I mean, full on BS. So France sends out forces, the UN peacekeeping forces come through. So we have the Portuguese, da 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 da. Right. Problem is this, right? Eventually, we had, the president of transition that came into place, and then we had our first female president, Samba Panza, who came into place, but she didn't stay for too long. She was also accused of corruption, etc. And fast forward now, we have Touadéra, the actual president of the country of Central African Republic. And so basically what happens is that in 2017, there's a situation where France basically, there's a documentary, there's an actual official French documentary that literally showcases the French military forces providing assistance to the anti-Balaka, so the anti-Muslim forces, so the Christians, the Christian military or mercenary forces or rebellion force, whatever you want to call it, militia that were fighting against the Selekas. And so you literally see the French army, some guys of the French army, special forces, whatever, meeting those guys. So this is a full-on documentary that didn't stay actually online too long. You might still be able to find it on YouTube, but I'm not totally sure. So that's already very bad for France. It's not a good look. So clearly, you can make of that a very direct interpretation. You guys are helping these folks out, right? You're helping these folks continue and pursuing this genocide against Muslim people. Oh, of course not. Obviously, with the history that you guys have with Rwanda, you also don't want to be mixed with it, but you mix with it. That's what you guys are literally sort of like doing. I mean, if it's not you guys, well, a faction within whatever force is trying to push this agenda. What kind of bullshit is that? What are you gaining from chasing away all the Muslims and massacring them? Right? That's one thing. So, in the meantime, as Jotoja takes over the country, our FACA, the Forces Armées Centrafricaines, which used to be a very elite force. I mean, our FACA back in the 90s, etc., were like, really, really good. And so the forces, that section of the Central African Army, portion of the Central African Army was through the years sort of like losing a lot of its strong leaders, and training started to get very fickle, to the point where and some say that it was also something that was wanted and an agenda pushed by again, everything is accusing France, but maybe it's their fault, maybe it's not. I mean, I think that on that specific point, Central Africans have a responsibility in making sure that they maintain the army intact. And, even though, there might be some interferences with foreign forces, which indeed it was known that the French instructors was actually, giving very, very, very bad instructions to our militaries, right? It was ridiculous what they were doing with them. On top of that, they our after this whole genocide situation from 2014 2015, the Central African forces, military forces, were not allowed any guns, any weapons. So now you have an army. So you don't have any sovereignty, obviously. Your army cannot defend the country. You cannot go in and start, bringing back order in the country. It's a full shit show. You don't know who is what is where. Like, everything is fucked. Like, you have to understand, everything is a mess. So the president of Jotoja, right? Jotoja, sorry, Touadéra, sorry. Jotoja was the one that was taken out of the country. And so, Nakaza group, Komeke. So Touadéra, what he did was he reunited, he tried to bring through this peace treaty that they signed, I think it was in 2017 or 2017, I think it was in maybe in Chad, they signed this peace treaty with all the rebel forces. Because you have to understand that at that point, you have so many rebel forces that gets created, and it's when I say it's a shit show, you don't understand. Like, it's fucked up. It's fucked up, and everybody comes with different agendas. The French give you this type of news, then the Americans will give you another. So you at a certain point, the propaganda was so massive that French news will tell you one thing, and then I remember Vice News, as much as you can criticize them for a lot of things, but their journalists actually went on the ground and did a rather serious investigation, and it was giving a completely different picture from what the French were giving, or some of the French medias. So all of that is politics and politics. But the problem is that these games are at the expense of so many innocent lives, right? Because y'all want to maintain your guy or whatever is the agenda. What justified the sacrifice? What is justifying such a genocide? What is justifying such a massacre of this population? And so, the church also got involved into this. At a certain point, they together with the imams and the mosques, they try to come together. It was a whole mess. And obviously, yes, Seleka also did some fucked up shit as well. They started, attacking as retaliation or whatnot, Christian civilians, massacring them. But then it got mixed up because you had Sudanese forces who are not Central African. And in that sense, I understand the dichotomy here, but because, this idiot brought, because this is absolutely just idiocy, but I guess without the Sudanese militia that he brought with him, he would have not been able to take over the country. And talking about that, I'm talking about Jotoja at the time, right? So all of these guys really, it's an absolute idiotic move. It's not even idiotic, it's horrendous. And so these guys, the Sudanese militia, obviously, a lot of them didn't want to go back. They were like, oh, well, this is nice. We might see ourselves here. And so shit got crazy. Shit got really, really crazy. And obviously, I'm skipping a lot of details, but I mean, at the time I was there, there was this guy that was, he was, I think, 16, 17 years old. No, a little older than that. I'll say 19. For the sake of, he looked really, really young. He was named, they used to call him Colonel. He had a war wound. They chopped off one of his leg, and that guy, man, his eyes were just like, pure blood. I mean, and at the time you could tell like a lot of these guys were not there to play. Like they'd kill you on sight, which was what happened. A lot of people, again, this whole thing became such a mess that even if you didn't want to be involved in it and you don't want to take part in the violence, you you couldn't just stay silent, right? But again, intimidation and so on and so forth. A lot of people, didn't quite know how to approach this whole conversation, you know. And so when you go now to the actual President Odera, trying to bring together everybody, all the militias together, and try to sign this peace treaty, which is more or less respected, not really, because now I told you, remember I told you guys about Bozize. This guy, man, this guy single-handedly fucked up the whole country, because the moment he took over the power back in 2003 from Ange-Félix Patassé through the coup, and I mean, this guy, I mean, still is causing trouble and avoc in the country. So now he created this whole thing called the CPC. So that's his movement, and he's found. So basically, in 2020, he tried to cause troubles in the election process in the country, which led the president to exclude him from the elections. So obviously, he didn't take that quite nicely, and decided to turn this whole thing into another militia, causing all these troubles. Understand that now the anti-Balaka, and this is what a lot of people are saying, they're like, well, the anti-Balaka, so the Christians, remember what I was telling you about this whole anti-Balaka against Seleka, the Christians against the Muslims nonsense. So a lot of these anti-Balaka got recycled into the CPC, right? So those are a lot of these core guys, core people, and so he found refuge in Chad. For those who understand a little bit about geopolitics, Chad is one of the biggest ally to France. And when the late President Idriss Déby got killed in Chad, his son took over, and this was condoned and absolutely given a pass to by the French government, even though they keep proning transparency, democracy, you name it. But being that Chad is one of the biggest forces supporting France in their endeavor to fight Al Qaeda, etc. A lot of people are asking themselves, how come, first of all, Chad, which is a brother country to Central African Republic, we share the same frontiers, would allow Bozize to cross the border and come and create REVOLUT again. All of that is creating confusion right now. These are ongoing conversations, and obviously everybody has their theories. So I'm not here to fuel any of that. But all I'm saying is, all I'm observing is that, fast forwarding to the presence of Russia and the Wagner Group in Central African Republic, and the reinforcement of the relationship between Central African Republic and Russia is motivated by the fact that France has marginalized our, sovereignty, and there's a bit of an undermining of the Central African desire, the population desire to actually come back to peace and really, start, regaining some sense of reconciliation, etc., etc., etc. Because a lot of these wounds are still very open,